Hi, I'm Kim Nicholas, Associate Professor of Sustainability Science at Lund University in Sweden. I'm here to talk about first, why have carbon emissions fallen under lockdown? The answer is because our carbon pollution comes mostly 87% from burning fossil fuels, so coal, oil, and gas that we burn for heating and energy and transport. Under the global pandemic, people are traveling less and industry is producing less, and that means we're burning less fossil fuels. Especially in transport, Europe, that's the second largest source of pollution, climate pollution, and in the US, the average person's biggest source of climate pollution is driving. So less travel for work and other commuting, especially less driving, and especially less flying. Hour for hour, flying is the fastest way to heat the climate. So all the flights that are being reduced are saving a lot of carbon. Sorry. We also know that there is that carbon pollution lasts, some of it, for thousands of years in the atmosphere, so that's a very long-term effect. There's also an immediate and short-term health benefit when we stop burning fossil fuels. Marshall Burke from Stanford has calculated that about 4,000 children and 73,000 adults over the age of 70 have had their lives saved in China in the last couple of months from reduced fossil fuel burning, and that's the immediate health effects from lower particulate matter and other pollution from air pollution caused by burning fossil fuels. What can we learn from the community response to the COVID crisis that can help fight the climate crisis? I think there's a lot to learn, and I think one thing that we see is that people really want to help, are willing to help, and willing to make big changes and even sacrifices when it's necessary to protect public health and the people that they love and the most vulnerable in our communities. So I think that's something we can really apply to the climate crisis. It gives me a lot of hope that we have the capacity that's necessary to tackle the climate crisis, because we can make big changes, and we need to make big changes. We're at a really urgent point in the climate crisis right now. I'm really inspired by the communities and the people who are using their talents and helping each other, reaching out to their neighbors, banding together, sharing resources. I see so much creativity, and that is really impressive and amazing. And I think people have so much to give and so many talents to offer in helping to solve the climate crisis as well. I think we also see that there's a risk that the most vulnerable are the most impacted or left behind or harmed in any big social change. It brings out existing inequalities, and that's really important to be aware of, to take care of each other in our communities, and for policymakers to work together with experts and design policies that are both effective and fair, and especially protect the vulnerable. So focusing on protecting people and nature, reducing harm, and increasing resilience. That's really my message, both for climate and for our current pandemic. How might people's behavior become more climate friendly after COVID? I think a big change that I see a lot of potential for is reducing unnecessary travel. In the US and in many households, travel is actually the biggest source of climate pollution, especially for frequent flyers. It dwarfs other sources of emissions. So people realizing, okay, actually I don't need to make that flight for a half-hour meeting for a potential new client that's 12 hours away. I've had colleagues tell me that that's something they've previously done, and they're finding ways to make those meetings work very effectively now digitally, and saving a lot of climate pollution in the process. Perhaps employers becoming more flexible about telecommuting. In a 2018 study led by Seth Wines, we found that that was actually the biggest savings in climate pollution in behavior change from individuals was telecommuting. So finding ways to make that a more part of everyday life, I think, could be very effective. And I think people probably are going to be thinking about where they live and work and go to school, and trying to minimize distance and travel time, and work for safer and more connected neighborhoods that have the services that they need, that are built around people rather than cars, and that offer access to nature, which we've seen is so important during this crisis. The question is whether I think emissions will continue to drop after the current pandemic crisis is over, or if they will bounce back and continue to increase. And my answer to that is emissions absolutely have to start dropping and continue dropping now. We're at a critical moment in the climate emergency where life on Earth really depends on us reducing our climate pollution to zero very quickly. That's what science shows us it will take to stabilize the climate, and that's what's necessary to ensure we have the possibility of a good life for us and future generations and life on Earth really to continue. So we are at the limit of time is running out, and we absolutely just have to start reducing our emissions now. So that means we can't go back to business as usual where we rely on fossil fuels to provide the services that we need. We need to be quickly transitioning to a clean energy society and basically redesigning society built around meeting people's needs and promoting our health and well-being while within the limits that the climate and the planet can afford. And that means reducing overconsumption, shutting down fossil energy, and very quickly transitioning to clean energy.